We're back here at the NFL Combine. I'm alongside PFF's lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema. And Trevor, this is your Super Bowl. This is your time to shine. Just tell the people back home, how busy are you? Like, what's your lineup like?
Obviously, it's a lot of stuff like this, but this is what makes it a lot of fun for me. Yeah. We do the preparation at PFF over really throughout the course of the NFL and the college football season to be ready for an event like this, to when, okay, guys are coming up to the podium, you know exactly what to ask them, whether it's something about a playing weight or maybe playing through an injury or a great statistical season or whatever. Like, that is what's the most fun, and obviously it means doing a lot of things like this, you know, getting to talk to people and teams about how to make them better and how to get them in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, speaking of the Vikings, having a 14-win season was incredible. We talked during the season about the run that they had. Where do you see their biggest position of need right now heading into the draft?
So, you know, obviously they're going to make a little bit of a quarterback change, it feels like, with Sam going elsewhere after an incredible year. But thankfully, they already have McCarthy, who's entrenched, so they were able to have a little bit of foresight there and have a long-term view when they were going into last year's draft, which I thought was really cool. We don't often see that for teams, but the planning ahead was great. So I think along those lines, making sure the offensive line is as good as it needs to be, right? Because you look at a guy like McCarthy, who was very productive when he was in his last year as a starter, when he was at Michigan. It was one of the best offensive lines in the country that he was playing behind. And so it's not like he can't go through adversity. Obviously, he's got some athleticism, some escapability to him, but it felt like that interior offensive line was an area where they could go into this offseason and potentially make some changes, some upgrades there. They've also got a lot of potential change at the cornerback position, right? A lot of those guys who are upcoming free agents might bring one or two of them back, but could be a lot of changes there in the secondary as well. So I look at that for this team, really secondary, then interior offensive line is the areas where they're going to prioritize when it comes to their draft focus.
As far as the prospects go for those positions, how do you feel like this draft class ranks as far as like the amount of talent?
There's a lot of really good corners, and you know, I think when you look at the Vikings, I'm very curious how they're going to navigate this draft, because obviously moving up a couple of times last year cost them in the future. So you go get the player that you want for the future, but the draft picks for the future kind of suffered a little bit. So they're sitting here with one pick in the first round, and they don't pick then until the end of the third round. So I'm wondering if they're going to feel like, hey, maybe we're going to move back out of the first round, get a couple of extra picks if that is possible. And I think believing the depth of those two positions are there on rounds 2 and round 3, they might believe that they can get one or two contributing players instead of maybe just one of them in the first round. Now, there's a lot of guys that I think could really fit what they want to do. You know, Trey Amos, the cornerback from Ole Miss, Savone Revel, the cornerback from ECU, Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback from Notre Dame. I think all of those guys could be fits for the Minnesota Vikings. Then when it comes to the interior offensive line, sure, you could potentially pick one of those guys at the back end of the first round, but this is a pretty deep class. There's a lot of tackles as well who played tackle in college who I think could kick into the inside and be really good football players. But if they were to stick it, you know, the back where they are right now in the first round, a guy like Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, a Tyler Booker from Alabama, those types of players who I think could be those plug-and-play guys on the interior.
Interesting, because the Vikings in the past couple of seasons have been able to find value in the undrafted free agent market. Afterwards. How are they able to pull that off, to be able to see something that maybe others don't?
It is such a hat tip to their scouting department, and I would say the chemistry that the scouts, the coaching staff, and the front office have together, right? Because when you think of these guys that are undrafted free agents, obviously it's a long draft weekend. There's more than 250 selections that get made. And when you find starters who all 32 other NFL teams didn't want to pick throughout those first 7 rounds, and yet you could find a guy who could be an impact player for you, you're identifying either certain skill sets or just mental makeup of guys that you go, look, he's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, he's not the strongest, but he sure as hell isn't a guy that I want to bet against. And like those are the players that you often target when it comes to those undrafted free agents. And so it's being in sync, your whole scouting department, from the scouts to the coaching staff to the front office, and then just being able to have great character evaluation for those players that you know could be those underdogs, have that chip on their shoulder, make a roster, and be good football players in the league.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your insight. Love the names that you gave us, too. We'll have to find out what the Vikings do when they get on the clock later on in the end of April for the NFL draft. But for now, we'll just enjoy the Combine.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate you having me.